not going to load you up with a bunch of bad drugs. Okay? But even if you happen to go see one of the other ones, the secondary choices, that's those other groups. Okay? I'm able to sit there with fully completed medical research. The most interesting part with Immunotech and what we have is we have a product that slows the aging process. Anybody you know might be interested in that.
Everybody.
Everybody. To the point that last year, your wife, she's worried about you aging too quickly. Is that what you're saying?
Hopefully you'll use it today.
But the point is, last year there was $163 billion spent on anti-aging
How
products.
much did you say?
$163 billion. By 2013, they think it'll be over $300 billion spent on anti-aging alone.
Oil of Olay.
Oil of Olay. Yeah. How many of you are taking a product that's got an antioxidant in it? If you ate cereal this morning, it's got antioxidant.
Grape juice.
Grape juice, whatever. Okay, so we're all familiar with antioxidants. What Immunotech came up with, what Dr. Gustavo Buenos discovered, and why I'm so impassioned about it, is a product that's a gift from God. Now that's a pretty powerful statement to say at a Christian's luncheon meeting, right? JP, pretty powerful. Oftentimes people think I'm referencing the fact that we have a protein that's a derivative from milk. There's no milk in it, but it's a protein that's isolated within milk that delivers a double-bonded cysteine that allows the body to make a substance known as glutathione. Every disease of aging coincides with lowering levels of this glutathione. Whether it's the wrinkling process, if you, Dr. Nicholas Perricone, girls may be familiar with him, a Yale dermatologist, has a number of products there. He says, there's only two things that cause your skin to age: free radical damage and inflammation. Those are the only two things. Glutathione is the body's master antioxidant. God doesn't make many mistakes, right? That's infallible, right? If antioxidants were important, wouldn't we make our own? We do. It's called glutathione. The limiting factor to us, when we're 20 years old and we're invincible, we have high levels of glutathione. As we get older, our glutathione levels diminish. That's when we get the arthritis. That's when we get all the other things that occur. What Immunocal, what Dr. Buenos was given, this gift, is a product that delivers the missing ingredient for our bodies to make glutathione. You can't eat glutathione, you can't drink glutathione, you can't ingest it in any way. You can do it intravenously in the hospital. They can give you IV injections. But you have to be able to build the missing building block. And that's what Immunocal is that missing building block. Why is it a gift from God? What's interesting is, soon to be 30 years ago, a box appears in Dr. Gustavo Buenos' desk of white powder and a $10,000 check and says, can you do anything with this? Okay? Fully completed, what we know as Immunocal was in that box, but no one knew what it was. But what's interesting is the progression of events that had to occur prior to Dr. Gustavo Buenos being at his desk and where we stand here today. Dr. Buenos was born in Italy, ended up going to England where he spent a little time with Alexander Fleming. If you're familiar with penicillin, you know the name Alexander Fleming. He then came to the U.S. Dr. Buenos immigrated to the U.S., where in the 1960s he was unable to stay because of our immigration laws. Actually, in the congressional record, there's reference to Dr. Gustavo Buenos and the fact that we need to not lose great people like him. And Dr. Buenos immigrated to Canada. Being a surgeon and a physician, he started looking at a lot of alternatives because his mind is always stretching. And the question that he asked himself was, the person went in for surgery. The surgery was a success, but the patient died. Why? Does anyone know that there's a nutritionist in a hospital? They owe their job to Dr. Gustavo Buenos because he was the doctor that made the connection between the diet that the patient was fed pre and post-op and the survival rate. Pretty amazing. Because of that, he did more and more research into nutrition. Thus, he receives a box of white powder and a $10,000 check 30 years ago. He happened to be, I love to put this word happen because Christians appreciate it so much, he happened to be doing research on animals with live tumorous cancer cells.
Wow.
That he injected into these animals, and 90% of these animals would develop tumors. When he fed them this white powder, less than 30% of them developed tumors. Interesting. He then continues this research, and it magically stops working. Feed the powder, nothing happens. Feed the powder, nothing happens. 2 years, nothing happens. Dr. Bunos, being a researcher and a doctor that's been on his feet for many years, now has to have double hip surgery. Okay? Takes you off your legs, right? While he's recovering, his sister came over from Italy to take care of him. Dr. Bunos was never married and always married to his job. His sister comes over to take care of him some 22, 23 years ago now, 24 years ago. And while Dr. Bunos is calling the people in Europe, are you doing anything different? No, we're same process. Everything is the same, nothing has changed. 2 years, doesn't work. Process doesn't repeat. Dr. Bunos is having hip surgery, happens to be watching a cooking show out of Europe via satellite over 20 years ago. You know, that was when you had the real big dishes, right? He happened to be watching a cooking show. There happened to be 2 chefs that were talking to each other. One chef says to the other, you know, the cheese just isn't as good as it used to be. Yeah, since they raised that pasteurization temperature, it's not as good. Dr. Bunos calls Europe. Tell me about this. They raised the temperature 2 degrees Celsius and killed the bioactivity of the product. Pretty amazing. Dr. Bunos now has the key as to why the product doesn't work. Still not the end of the story, because the story's still being written today. But what's most interesting is Dr. Bunos now is in his early 60s, 61, 62 years old. At age 65, don't show up for work in Canada. You're done. Even though you're the well-recognized College of Surgeons and Awards in Canada, which means that the Canadian government would fund all the research you want to do. Dr. Bunos goes to rent an office space next to McGill University of Montreal. McGill is the equivalent of Harvard in the medical school. He goes to rent an office space. The day he goes, the gentleman that owns the building happens to be there with the renting agent. His name is Mr. Dieter Beer. Dieter was there, and the renting agent says, I'm renting this office, I've got a physician coming, going to put a lab in. Dieter's comment was, you're going to put a medical lab in a building where we have the Bank of Canada, the Bank of the Bahamas, and the third bank renting office space. I need to know what you're doing. Well, Dieter made a fortune, according to him, by recognizing genius. And he said he recognized the genius of Dr. Gustavo Bunos immediately. Dieter had made a fortune in Europe. He was the sole importer for over 20 years with this company called Tech Electronics for all of Sony, JVC, Panasonic, and Emerson Electronics. So he made quite a fortune. Dieter invested an additional $10 million of his personal fortune to obtain the patents that allow us to say Immunocal treats and prevents cancer in the U.S. We now have 80 patents worldwide. And he continued to fund the research of Dr. Bunos. Unbeknownst to either one of them, because I love the story, we're talking Christianity, and we're talking about this gift from God, right? Unbeknownst to either one of them, 2 years earlier, in the process of, after the product was working again, a lady comes into the hospital and has inoperable lung cancer, early stages. Her doctor, because she's got some weight issues, starts her, asks about this protein that Dr. Bunos was working on, and puts the lady on Immunocal, what is known as Immunocal now. Then it was just a powder that he was working on. Her lung cancer disappeared. Unbeknownst to Dieter and Dr. Bunos at the time they were talking about this occurrence, that was Dieter Beer's mother. Pretty amazing. From there, we enter Mr. Chuck Roberts as Dieter's partner in Immunotech Research. Chuck's grandfather had been the founding president of Kraft Foods. Chuck owned the Descent ski wear company, the Pedigree ski wear company. The U.S., Canadian, Swiss ski teams all ski in Descent. Very successful gentleman. Alex Konensberg was one of the original founders of Immunotech. Alex was the senior managing partner of the most prestigious law firm in Canada.